Welcome to the last-minute audiobook on British literature, a powerful revision tool crafted from over 1,000 hand-picked questions. This isn't your usual study guide. It's your brain's training ground for thinking fast, switching gears, and making connections across the vast terrain of British literary history. Students have cracked the UGC NET exam with just 1 hour a day listening to this. No exaggeration. 75 questions from our last edition showed up in the actual exam. That's not luck, that's strategy. And now it's your turn. Whether you're on a walk, stuck in traffic, or winding down for the day, plug in and let your mind rehearse, revise, and retain like never before. You can stream it now on YouTube, Spotify, and all major platforms. This is India's first full-length British literature audiobook designed for serious aspirants like you. So take a deep breath and let's begin. Edmund Spenser wrote The Fairy Queen, Philip Sidney authored The Defense of Poesy, Thomas Wyatt penned Whose List to Hunt, and Henry Howard wrote So Cruel Prison How Could Betide. Cymbeline does not fall in the category of a revenge tragedy, but it falls in tragicomedy. The chronological order of Shakespeare's plays is Love's Labour Lost, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, Twelfth Night, and The Tempest. The lines, "O sir, content you. I follow him to serve my turn upon him. We cannot all be masters, nor all masters cannot be truly followed," are spoken by Iago. The first folio of Shakespeare's plays appeared in 1623. Much Ado About Nothing is a romantic comedy. The chronological order of Francis Bacon's works is Advancement of Learning, Novum Organum, History of Henry VII, De Augmentis Scientiarum, The New Atlantis. Holy Sonnet 17 is John Donne's elegy on the death of his wife in 1617. Peachum is a character in the Threepenny Opera. Samuel Johnson ended the system of patronage with his Letter to Lord Chesterfield. Elegy on the Death of a Mad Dog appears in The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. William Blake illustrated the works of Thomas Gray and Robert Blair. Chronological order is The Tiger, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, The Solitary Reaper, Ode to Autumn, Adonais. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind uses terza rima. Gothic novels often use medieval architecture and evoke terror through mystery and horror. Andrea del Sarto by Robert Browning is a dramatic monologue. George Eliot's last novel is Daniel Deronda. Chronological order of Lawrence's novels are The White Peacock, The Trespasser, Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, Woman in Love. W.B. Yeats was not a member of the Bloomsbury Group. Chronological order of Yeats's poems are Adam's Curse, The Wild Swans at Coole, The Second Coming Among School Children, Under Ben Bulben. Once more, the storm is howling and half hid. Under this cradle hood and cover lid, my child sleeps on. There is no obstacle but Gregory's Wood and one bare hill. The lines are from A Prayer for My Daughter by W.B. Yeats. Graham Greene did not employ the stream of consciousness technique. Prominent authors who utilize the stream of consciousness technique include Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, William Faulkner, Marcel Proust, and Dorothy Richardson. The Leda and the Swan is a poem by Yeats. Penn was founded under the presidency of John Galsworthy. Chronological order of periodicals are Edinburgh Review, Quarterly Review, Westminster Review, Spectator, Fraser's Magazine. Chronological order of poems are Beowulf, The Fairy Queen, Paradise Lost, The Pilgrim's Progress, Endymion, In Every Man, Only Good Deeds stays with him to face death. The Canterbury Tales includes 29 pilgrims, mixes prose and verse, and contains only 24 stories. William Tyndale was burned for translating the Bible and is remembered for his significant work. Thomas More coined the term utopia. Orwell and Huxley wrote dystopian counterparts. Gorboduc was completed by Thomas Sackville after the first 3 acts by Thomas Norton. There are 12 nights in Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen. Henry III and Richard V are not Shakespearean historical plays. John Milton was known as the Lady of Christ's during his Cambridge days. John Fletcher and Francis Beaumont co-wrote Cupid's Revenge and The Maid's Tragedy. The Man of Mode is a play by Etheridge. The Country Wife is a play by Wycherley. The Old Bachelor is a play by Congreve. The Provoked Wife is a play by Vanbrugh. Sir Thomas Browne's Vulgar Errors explores mistaken beliefs among the uneducated. The Guardian was started by Addison and Steele after The Spectator. Mary Wollstonecraft's autobiographical novel is Mary, a fiction. There is one great society alone on earth, the noble living and the noble dead, appears in Wordsworth's The Prelude, France. An ode was written by S.T. Coleridge. The Lake School of Poetry, also known as the Lake Poets, is a group of English Romantic poets who lived in the Lake District of England in the early 19th century. The most prominent members were William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and Robert Southey. The Idylls of the King is a poem by Tennyson. Dramatic Lyrics is a poem by Robert Browning. Sonnets from the Portuguese is by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Poems and Ballads is by A.C. Swinburne. Falsehood is so easy, truth so difficult. Examine your words well, and you will find that even when you have no motive to be false, it is a very hard thing to say the exact truth even about your own immediate feelings, said by George Eliot. Evelina is by Fanny Burney. Agnes Grey is by Anne Bronte. The Good Earth is by Pearl Buck. My Son's Story is by Nadine Gordimer. Oscar Wilde observed that the artistic critic, like the mystic, is an antinomian always. Happiness is but the occasional episode in a general drama of pain, said Thomas Hardy. Be still when you have nothing to say. When genuine passion moves you, say what you've got to say and say it not, said D.H. Lawrence. Eternity is said not to be an extension of time, but an absence of time, said Graham Greene. Vices are sometimes only virtues carried to excess, said Charles Dickens. The terms inscape and in stress were invented by G.M. Hopkins. The Bloomsbury Group was a collective of British writers, intellectuals, artists and philosophers active in the early 20th century. Key members included Virginia Woolf, her husband Leonard Woolf, her sister Vanessa Bell, and her husband Clive Bell, artists Duncan Grant and Roger Fry, economist John Maynard Keynes, and writers E.M. Forster and Lytton Strachey. The term stream of consciousness was coined by May Sinclair. Booker Prize introduced in 1968, Pulitzer Prize introduced in 1917, Nobel Prize introduced in 1901, Poet Laureate UK introduced in 1668, chronological order of children's books, The Hobbit, Lord of the Flies, The Lion, The Witch and the Wardrobe, Northern Lights, The Goblet of Fire. G.B. Shaw's plays in order are Arms and the Man, Man and Superman, Pygmalion, St. Joan, Too True to be Good. The Abbey Theatre was co-founded by W.B. Yeats, one of the leading figures in the Irish literary revival. The term theatre of the absurd was popularized by Martin Esslin to describe plays that reflect the existentialist philosophy. The Hope Theatre was managed by Philip Henslow, an Elizabethan theatrical entrepreneur. The concept of the theatre of silence is associated with Jean-Jacques Barnard, known for his avant-garde theatrical ideas. The Angry Young Men were a group of British writers, primarily playwrights and novelists who emerged in the 1950s and 1950s, known for their rebellious and disillusionment with the British establishment. They expressed discontent with the social and political structures of post-World War II Britain. The group's leading figures included John Osborne and Kingsley Amis. Other popular figures included John Braine, Alan Sillitoe and John Wayne. Golden Child can refer to several works. One is a novel by Claire Adam. Another is a play by David Henry Wang, which draws on stories from his grandmother's life in China. Agatha Christie's detective novels in order: The Mysterious Affair at Styles, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, Sparkling Cyanide. Nobel Prize winners are Orhan Pamuk, Harold Pinter and Herta Müller. Hellenistic philosophy is marked by the tendencies of cynicism, Epicureanism, and Stoicism. The Aeneid by Virgil recounts the story of Aeneas' journey in the first 6 books, modeled on the Odyssey, and makes Aeneas the founder of Roman greatness and Lavinium. Chronological order. First English Bible translation by John Wycliffe, Gutenberg Bible, Caxton's History of Troy, Caxton's Printing Press, Morte d'Arthur by Caxton. Chronological order. The Prince by Machiavelli, Utopia by More, Luther's 95 by Thesis, Orlando Furioso, and Book of Common Prayer. Chronological order of Shakespeare's plays are The Taming of the Shrew, Romeo and Juliet, Much Ado About Nothing, Twelfth Night, The Winter's Tale. Francis Bacon asserted, "If a man will begin with certainties, he shall end in doubts. But if he will be content to begin with doubts, he shall end in certainties." Alexander Pope believed that an author has no claim to original thought, only to apt presentation of thoughts already existing. Kit Kat Club, association of early 18th century Whig leaders that met in London. Members included the writers Richard Steele, Joseph Addison, and William Congreve, and such political figures as Robert Walpole and the Duke of Marlborough. The Rehearsal by George Villiers mocks the Restoration drama of Dryden and Otway. William Hazlitt wrote, "Poetry is not a branch of authorship. It is the stuff of which one life is made. The rest is mere oblivion, a dead letter, for all that is worth remembering in life is the poetry of it." The epigraph of Frankenstein is taken from Book 10 of Paradise Lost, where Adam asks, "Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay? To mold me, man, did I solicit thee? From darkness to promote me?" William Godwin's Things as They Are, or The Adventures of Caleb Williams, was written as a call to end the abuse of power by a tyrannical government. Some Thoughts Concerning Education is a treatise on the education of gentlemen written by the English philosopher John Locke. The text The Wrongs of Woman is written by Mary Wollstonecraft. Plan of a Novel was written by Jane Austen. Men's Wives by Thackeray is a trio of satirical stories portraying unhappy marriage and exploitation. Friendship's Garland, published in 1871, is a sequel to Matthew Arnold's Culture and Anarchy. Huxley, Alfred Tennyson, and William Gladstone were associated with the Metaphysical Society, founded in 1869. Sherlock Holmes made his first appearance in Our Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle. D.H. Lawrence's Women in Love is a sequel to The Rainbow. Maurice by E.M. Foster is a novel about homosexual love. The Booker Prize is a prestigious British award given annually to a full-length novel. It was established in 1968 by the multinational company Booker McConnell and was intended to serve as a counterpart to the Prix Goncourt in France. Walt Soyinka is the first African writer to win the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1986. Nadine Gordimer won the Nobel Prize in 1991. She is South African writer known for her anti-apartheid stance. Derek Walcott won the Nobel Prize in 1992. He is the St. Lucian poet, won for his work exploring cultural identity in the Caribbean. J.M. Coetzee won the prize in 2003, who is South African novelist recognized for his intense prose and moral depth. The Castle of Perseverance is one of the earliest known full-length morality plays, depicting the spiritual struggle of mankind. Mind, Will and Understanding is also a morality play personifying aspects of human psychology and spiritual conflict. Mankind is a popular 15th century morality play dealing with temptation, repentance, and salvation. Correct sequence of English literary periods is Jacobean Age, Caroline Age, Commonwealth Period, Restoration Age, and Augustan Age. Chronological order of birth of British poets is John Donne, Thomas Carew, John Milton, Richard Lovelace, and Andrew Marvell. Chronological order of John Milton's works is L'Allegro, Comus, Lycidas, Paradise Lost, and Paradise Regained. Chronological order of dramatists by birth is John Dryden, William Wycherley, William Congreve, George Bernard Shaw, and J.M. Synge. Jonathan Swift wrote The Journal of Stella. Chronological order of major biographical works is Johnson's Dictionary, The Vicar of Wakefield, Lives of the Poets, Life of Johnson, and The Life of Nelson. I awoke one morning and found myself famous, was said by Lord Byron. P.B. Shelley's Adonais laments the death of John Keats. The Cockney School refers to a group of poets and essayists writing in England in the second and third decades of the 19th century. The term came in the form of hostile reviews in Blackwood's magazine in 1817. Its primary target was Leigh Hunt, but John Keats and William Hazlitt were also included. Only Keats could properly be regarded as a Cockney. Hazlitt was not even born in London. John Scott died after a duel over the controversy. Robert Southey described Byron's works as monstrous combinations of horrors and mockery, lewdness and impiety. John Keats dedicated his work Endymion to Thomas Chatterton. The line, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," appears in Alfred Tennyson's In Memoriam. To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell, The Scholar Gypsy by Matthew Arnold, Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, If is by Rudyard Kipling. Dante Gabriel Rossetti and John Everett Millais were associated with the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. The British poet who wrote Sohrab and Rustum is Matthew Arnold. The Two Nations is the subtitle of Benjamin Disraeli's novel Sybil. Pen names. Charles Lutwidge Dodgson's pen name is Lewis Carroll. Mary Ann Evans is George Eliot. Eric Arthur Blair's pen name is George Orwell. Samuel Langhorne Clemens adopted the pen name Mark Twain. The correct chronological order of the movements is Pre-Raphaelitism, Impressionism, Futurism, Imagism, Absurdism. The chronological order of D.H. Lawrence's works is The White Peacock, Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, The Plumed Serpent, Lady Chatterley's Lover. The movement was a term coined in 1954 by J.D. Scott, literary editor of The Spectator, to describe a group of writers including Philip Larkin, Kingsley Amis, Donald Davy, D.J. Enright, John Wayne, Elizabeth Jennings, Tom Gunn, and Robert Conquest. John Skelton is recognized as an early Tudor poet. The Globe Theatre burned down in 1613 during a performance of Henry VIII. Ben Jonson wrote The Devil is an Ass and The Staple of News. The Red Lion in Stepney was built in 1567 by John Brain. Religio Laici was written by John Dryden, and the title means a layman's faith. Milton's Samson Agonistes adapts the form of Greek tragedy. 3 Hours. After Marriage was a satire, collaboratively written by John Gay, Alexander Pope, and John Arbuthnot. Richard Brinsley Sheridan wrote St. Patrick's Day in the Duenna. Intimations of Immortality was published in 1807, and it sums up Wordsworth's philosophy of childhood. The correct chronological sequence is The Caller, then Paradise Lost, then Beppo, then the 1st of September 1939 and Seeing Things. The line, I took her hand in mine and we went out of the ruined place, and as the morning mists had risen long ago when I first left the forge, so the evening mists were rising now. And in all the broad expanse of tranquil light they showed to me, I saw no shadow of another parting from her. These lines are from Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. Captain Frederick Wentworth is a character in Jane Austen's Persuasion. Adam, in Adam Bede by George Eliot, is a carpenter. Edwardian novelists include Arnold Bennett, H.G. Wells, and E.M. Forster. The correct author work matchings are George Meredith wrote Evan Harrington, George Eliot wrote Scenes of Clerical Life, Charlotte Bronte wrote The Professor, William Makepeace Thackeray wrote The Virginians. The correct publication order is Tess of the D'Urbervilles, The Time Machine, Kim, The Old Wives' Tale, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Figures mentioned in the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock include Michelangelo and Hamlet. Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque was written by Edgar Allan Poe. The Golden Bough, which influenced T.S. Eliot, was written by James George Frazer. Lewis Grassic Gibbon's A Scott Square trilogy includes Sunset Song, Cloud How, and Grey Granite. Ted Hughes's Vaudeville is named after the wild men of the woods from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Lines and Shadows is a work by Christopher Isherwood. The Still Centre is a work by Stephen Spender. Translation of Agamemnon is a work by Louis MacNeice. The Sea and the Mirror is a work by W.H. Auden. A Sort of Life is a work by Graham Greene. Journal of the Plague Year is a work by Daniel Defoe. Down and Out in Paris. And London is a work by George Orwell. The Grass is Singing is a work by Doris Lessing. William Faulkner wrote Sanctuary, Light in August, and Absalom, Absalom. James Fenton, Seamus Heaney, and Paul Muldoon held the Oxford Professor of Poetry chair. The Beat Generation poets were a group of American writers who emerged in the 1950s, known for their rejection of mainstream American values and their exploration of unconventional lifestyles and themes. They challenged literary formalism and embraced spontaneity, personal experience, and social critique. Key figures include Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, William S. Burroughs, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and Gregory Corso. The movement poets include Donald Davy and Philip Larkin. The Cambridge critics include F.R. Lewis, Iowa Richards, and William Empson. The Frankfurt School was shaped by Adorno and Horkheimer, established the term critical theory, and was forced into exile during Nazi Germany. Agamemnon and the Libation Bearers are part of Aeschylus's Oresteia trilogy. John of Trevisa and John Mandeville were known for writing secular prose in the 14th century. Edmund Spenser's The Shepherd's Calendar was dedicated to Sir Philip Sidney. Philip Henslowe, as the proprietor of the Rose Theatre, repaired and expanded it in 1592. The correct chronological order of John Milton's publications is On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, On Shakespeare, Lycidas, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. In Dryden's Absalom and Achitophel, Achitophel allegorically represents the first Earl of Shaftesbury. Lucasta. Posthume Poems was composed by Richard Lovelace and published after his death. Galatea, a mythological and romantic comedy, was written by John Lilly. The poem, Addressed to a Steam Vessel, was composed by Joanna Bailey. When I found myself on my feet, I looked about me and must confess I never beheld a more entertaining prospect. The country round appeared like a continued garden, and the enclosed fields, which were generally 40 foot square, resembled so many beds of flowers, is from Gulliver's Travels. The passage about abortions is from A Modest Proposal. Having to no purpose used all peaceable endeavours, the collected part of the semen, raised and inflamed, became a dust, converted to choler, turned head upon the spinal duct, and ascended to the brain. Is from A Tale of a Tub. The street filth scene is from A Description of a City Shower. Jonathan Swift was born in Dublin, studied at Kilkenny Grammar School and Trinity College, Dublin, and was ordained in the Church of Ireland in 1695. Thomas Love Peacock wrote Headlong Hall and Nightmare Abbey, both of which are satirical novels. The Stones of Venice was not written by Thomas Carlyle. It was authored by John Ruskin. In Charles Dickens's Nicholas Nickleby, a spirited 19-year-old is left penniless with his mother and sister after his father's death. Wilkie Collins is the author of Basil and the Woman in White. The lines, "And so I missed my chance with one of the lords of life, and I have something to expiate. A pettiness," are from D.H. Lawrence's poem Snake. Christopher Hill wrote Milton and the English Revolution. Catherine Belsey wrote John Milton, Language, Gender, Power. E.M.W. Tilliard is known for his work on Milton, and Thomas N. Corns studied Milton's language. The Voyage of the Beagle, a significant work in natural history, was written by Charles Darwin. The Return of the Native is by Thomas Hardy, Mrs. Dalloway is by Virginia Woolf, and The Professor is by Charlotte Bronte. Charles Lamb compiled specimens of the English dramatic poets who lived about the time of Shakespeare. William Hazlitt authored characters of Shakespeare's plays. Walter Savage Landor wrote Imaginary Conversations, and Thomas Love Peacock penned Grill Grange. The correct chronological order of publication is Jane Eyre, The Newcomes, A Tale of Two Cities, Middlemarch, and The Return of the Native. The chronological order of Hardy's novels is Under the Greenwood Tree, A Pair of Blue Eyes, Far from the Madding Crowd, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and Jude the Obscure. The Darkling Thrush was published first, followed by A Tramp Woman's Tragedy, Channel Firing, In Time of the Breaking of Nations, and finally, He Never Expected Much. Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence led to Penguin Books' famous obscenity trial, after which they were acquitted. Louis MacNeice's poems were published in the following order: Sunday Morning, Bagpipe Music, Entirely, Prayer Before Birth, and Stargazer. Philip Larkin once wrote to a friend that after reading Sons and Lovers, he felt ready to die and believed Lawrence would still be England's greatest novelist if he had died right after it. Death of a Naturalist by Seamus Heaney and Responsibilities by W.B. Yeats. Edward Bond is the playwright who adapted Shakespeare's King Lear into the play Lear. A Weekend with Claude was the first published novel by Beryl Bainbridge. John Evelyn was a famous English diarist of the 17th century. Joseph Addison was associated with The Spectator and The Tatler, both influential 18th century periodicals. Charles Dickens was the founding editor of both Household Words and All the Year Round. John Dryden was not an original member of Samuel Johnson's Literary Club. Oliver Goldsmith, Edmund Burke, and John Hawkins were. Out on Stage. Lesbian and Gay Theatre in the 20th Century was written by Alan Sinfield. Beowulf was the earliest, followed by Summa Theologica, Divina Commedia, Canterbury Tales, and Le Morte d'Arthur, Tales and Ved like Clay G. She Stoops to Conquer is lively, well plotted, stylish, and free of restoration vulgarity. It does have excellent characters. The interlude is considered the immediate predecessor of proper drama in English literary history. Afra Bain's Orunoko and The Fair Jilt are examples of early prose romances preceding the novel form. William Blake composed The Divine Image, Holy Thursday, The Little Boy Lost, and The Little Boy Found. In John Keats's Ode to Psyche, Psyche is a mortal woman elevated to goddess status. The Skylark, The Badger, The Gypsy Camp, and First Love were all written by John Clare. When We Two Parted is by Lord Byron, not Shelley. Christophine is from White Sargasso Sea, Zillah from Wuthering Heights, Estella from Great Expectations, and Equife from Things Fall Apart. Wuthering Heights was published in 1847 under the pseudonym Ellis Bell and is noted for its unique structure and lack of authorial intrusion. Miss Crawford belongs to Mansfield Park. Jude the Obscure was first published in an abridged form as Heart's Insurgent. A Tale of Two Cities refers to London and Paris. The publication order of Dickens's novels is Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, Hard Times, A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations. The Castle of Otranto is subtitled A Gothic Story, Tess is a Pure Woman, Frankenstein is the Modern Prometheus, and Vanity Fair is a novel without a hero. Sons and Lovers is semi-autobiographical and psychological. Waiting for Godot is known for static structure and incoherent, despair-laden dialogue. Marjorie Bolton said, "A true play is three-dimensional. It is literature that walks and talks before our eyes." The university wits focused on heroes and grandeur, not on the lives of common figures. In 1920, Ezra Pound said, "There is no longer any intellectual life in England." In absurd theatre, fragmented speech reflects the meaninglessness and purposelessness of human existence. The 101 Dalmatians is a novel, not a literary journal, unlike The Egoist, The Criterion, and The English Review. Household Words, The Friend, The Guardian, and The Indicator were all literary periodicals, but not The Metamorphosis. William Shakespeare is the author of the mystical poem The Phoenix and the Turtle. The poems, A Hymn to God the Father, Elegy on Mistress Bulstrode, Hymn to God my God, In My Sickness, and A Valediction of Weeping were all composed by John Donne, the metaphysical master. The reflective and paradoxical lines beginning, My love is of a birth as rare, are from Andrew Marvell's celebrated poem, The Definition of Love. The popular Scottish lyric, A Red, Red Rose, was penned by Robert Burns, celebrated for his emotional and musical verse. Lord Byron's romantic poem, She Walks in Beauty, was composed in the year 1814, reflecting the poet's fascination with idealized beauty. The dystopian science fiction novel The Last Man, which imagines a post-apocalyptic world devastated by plague, was written by Mary Shelley. The chronological order of major works by Thomas Carlyle begins with Signs of the Times 1829, followed by the French Revolution 1837, Chartism 1839, Heroes and Hero Worship 1841, and Occasional Discourse on the Nigger Question 1849. When considering feminist and proto-feminist texts, the correct order is Maria by Mary Wollstonecraft 1798, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley 1818, The Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West 1918, The Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer 1970, and A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf 1929. In Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens, the character Mrs. Gamp appears. Sir Ralph Bloomfield Bonington is from G.B. Shaw's The Doctor's Dilemma. Abraham D'Urberville is from Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and Harry is a character from T.S. Eliot's The Family Reunion. Rudyard Kipling was born on the 30th of December, 1865 in Bombay, India. He received the Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1907, and The Jungle Book was published in 1894. Cards of Identity was authored by Nigel Dennis, Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell, Technique as Discovery by Mark Schorer, and The Gay Science by Friedrich Nietzsche. In terms of proper author-text association, The Romance of the Forest was written by Anne Radcliffe, The Deserted Village by Oliver Goldsmith, The Sisters by Swinburne, and The Vision of Judgment by Lord Byron. A chronological sequence of significant British literary works would be Middlemarch, 1871, The Good Soldier, 1915, Night and Day, 1919, A Passage to India, 1924, and Heart of Darkness, 1899, D.H. Lawrence's major novels were published in the following order: Sons and Lovers, 1913, The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd, 1914, The Rainbow, 1915, Women in Love, 1920, and Kangaroo, 1923. Mrs. Warren's Profession by G.B. Shaw is not based on the theme of disability. Renaissance humanism was both anthropocentric and marked by a profound revival of classical literature and intellectual thought. Finally, liberal humanism holds that the human mind is objective and capable of understanding absolute truths, viewing language as a transparent medium,